welcome everybody who is joining. Wow, this is, we're just ticked to 1 minute past the hour and we've already got around sort of 35 plus people I think I can see who have dialed in. Everybody's on time for this one. This is a hot topic as we look at the insights from SWOOP's SharePoint Intranet Benchmarking. We'll give it a couple more minutes as more people join before we kick off. But yeah, fantastic to be joined today by Sam, Jonas, and Sharon, who are just getting prepared to share their thoughts on the insights. The way this will work today is what we'll do is I've got a few slides to go through to share what we think are the key insights from our Intranet Benchmarking Report. And then really today is all about hearing the experts' perspective. So we've got, I guess, the SWOOP expertise is in the report, right? And that's the key insights that we're pulling out, and they're the foundation for the discussion today. But yeah, you'll be hearing less of me and much more of our experts today. So thank you to everybody who's dialed in. We'll just give it maybe 1 more minute as more people join, and then I will jump into a few slides, as I said. So today's session is recorded, and we will be sharing a recording after the event, so you can share with your colleagues and friends and family who might be interested in the topics we discussed today. But for now, let me kick off with a welcome, everybody. Today's session is looking at the topic of how to run a successful intranet. That's a massive topic. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the insights from SWOOP's SharePoint Intranet Benchmarking. So I know many of you that are registered today have already downloaded that. I'll share a link in a moment to download that. Actually, Kai, Nicole, who are on the call from SWOOP, if you have the link handy for people to access, drop that in the chat. And I see, thank you, Serena and Nicole, for posting. Yeah, as you join, it would be great if you could post in the chat where you're dialing in from, and a little about your interest in intranets as well. I'd be interested to hear what drives your interest in today's topic. There'll be various points today where I'll invite you to share your comments and thoughts, but please feel free at any point to share comments, thoughts, questions in the chat. Today's session is mostly around the discussion between our expert guests. So let's introduce them quickly. So myself and Nicole are here from the SWOOP side. There's a few other people from the SWOOP team. We've got Serena and Kai, and I think Gemma as well, I can see there. So there's a number of people from the SWOOP team. If you haven't already, SWOOPers, if you introduce yourselves in the chat, I think you have done so already. And then our experts. This is kind of the joy in the party is going to be from these 3 people, not to heap pressure on you, Jonas, Sharon, and Sam. I won't go into introducing each of these experts. I know that all of you who've signed up really have come from networks and areas where you know these people, but I will invite each of our experts, if you do want to share a little bit about yourself in the chat, any links to the work you do, anything that you want to share, feel free. Please share some details. But from my perspective, just for me personally, I've been following the content from Sam, Sharon, and Jonas for many years as a practitioner myself in this space, as someone who's had the joys and the pains of managing intranets. It's a real pleasure for me, and yeah, no little honor to be on a call, sort of having a conversation with these 3 people who I've followed for many years. So it's like my smile is genuine about the fact that I'm lucky enough to be sat here today. And that's enough sucking up from me, but it is great to have you on the call. Thanks for making the time to share your knowledge and expertise with all of our guests today. So today's session, the basis of it is our recently released SharePoint Intranet Benchmarking Report. So we've done a large-scale analysis of almost over 36,400 intranet pages. Of those, over 14,000 news pages. So we've got a lot of intranet content from a number of different organizations, and that intranet content being accessed by almost 100,000 employees. So this is a large-scale benchmarking study, and today we're going to share some of those key highlights. For those of you that haven't already downloaded it, I'm just going to put up here now this QR code that you can scan, and I think the link will be shared with regular points in the chat as well. But if you did want to download the report, if you haven't done so already, you can do so via this QR code or via the link that will be shared in the chat. Yeah, without any further waffle, let's get into these key highlights. So the way that we're going to run this is I'm going to run through the 5 key insights that we wanted to present today from the benchmarking report, and then I'll invite our experts to have a discussion. And if at any point as I'm going through these next 5 slides, sharing the 5 key insights, I would love it in the chat. If you have any questions, if you have any comments about your experience around these insights, please share that in the chat, and we can pick up on those questions and those comments when we're talking with the experts, and we can throw some of those questions at Sam, Jonas, and Sharon and get some expert perspectives. So, first insight, and this is one that I'm sure many on the call will be interested in. When is the best time for employees to be reading news on the intranet, or what's the prime time that they're reading news on the intranet? I'm not sure about you, but this to me was very interesting as someone who's been responsible for intranet news, and seeing here in black and white, the data backs up sort of a gut feeling that I'm sure many of you have had around. It's that pre-work window and it's the around lunchtime window is when people are reading news on the intranet. So our benchmarking found, 7 to 9 a.m. or 11 to 1 p.m. and Thursday as the best day. So out there, does this resonate with you? If you want to share in the chat your experience, some of you may have done your own research in your own organizations and found something that aligns to this or conflicts with this. I'd love to hear any perspectives that you've got. So throw that in the chat. News is read liberally on each weekday, with Thursday being the best, as I said. It's best to post earlier in the week to avoid the disrupted attention of a weekend. So all very logical, right? So some solid data finally backing up what many of us, I think, have felt over the years. If we look then at the second insight around how much time do employees spend visiting and reading on the intranet, this one was a little different for me. This kind of made me go, wow, okay, 17 minutes a day on average. And I'm really interested to get the expert's perspective on this. But we saw there's quite a range of visit time, of how much time employees spend on the intranet. But overall, that average is quite a big number, I think. So I'm interested again there to see, do you think, those of you on this call today, what's your perspective on this? Does that seem like a big number, a small number? What's your experience? So 17 minutes a day on average, how much time employees spend visiting and reading the intranet. The third insight here that we're sharing is, how long should an intranet news article be? So this is a bit of a holy grail for those news people out there. So the internal comms people on this call, we can tell you that the data has spoken, and 500 words or more is what our data is showing. So the top ranking 20% of news articles averaged around 500 words. So there's a sweet spot there. But there isn't a big drop off in readership if an article goes longer than that. That's what we've found in the data. So this may be challenging to some of you out there who might have some rules in place around how long or short an article should be, a news article on your intranet should be. Probably the most interesting thing is these last words of this point, with 300 words or less on a news article had the least engagement. So interesting stuff there. Fourth insight, what devices do employees use to access the intranet? Not a huge surprise here that the majority is their desktop, but perhaps a big surprise is how extreme that majority accessing the intranet is. Only 0.22% of employees access the intranet via their phone and 0.02% by a tablet. So some big food for thought there. On to the final insight that's the sort of backdrop, I guess, of today's conversation. How long do intranet news articles sustain reader interest? So we're looking at about a week being the general answer there. So we've got some sort of caveats around that. So depending on the topic and context of each news article, it ranges from 3 days to a few weeks. But overall, when you look at news articles as a whole, it's about a week that a news article is sustaining reader interest. So we've got some really strong insights coming through there. And I think probably the best place to start the conversation will be, I'm going to put one of our experts on the spot straight away and say, was there any particular one of these insights that jumped out at you and made you stop and think, oh, interesting? And I'm going to pick, because you were the first one to turn up, Sharon, good on you. I'm going to start with you. You get the pleasure of me putting that question to you first. Which one of these 5 key insights really jumped out at you and made you think?
For sure, it's the one about the mobile versus desktop experience. I've been working with intranets for over 15 years now, and actually I've rolled out loads of mobile intranets, and it's always had the sense of, if we make it available to people on mobile, that's definitely going to make a difference in adoption. And actually, so initially I was quite surprised by this finding, and then I thought about it, and actually, you know what, so many of the intranets that I've rolled over the years, the level of adoption, even once you have done all that work of getting it out into floor field workforces, onto mobile phones, they just don't get the traction. So Jonathan, my business partner, I had a really long chat about this one. And is it that the experience is poor? Quite possibly. The mobile experience of SharePoint is not brilliant. Or is there something much more fundamental there around what people actually want and need? And ultimately, I think Sam and I talked about this at a conference we were at recently, that ultimately we need to understand what role is this playing in people's lives. And often people will want a mobile experience in order to get something done while they're out and about. But do they want to sit there and browse articles? Perhaps not. We really need to understand a lot more around the context in which people are working, what their user needs are, what needs they have for information at any one time, and not just make a lazy assumption that if we make an intranet available on a mobile, people are going to use it. They're not, unless they have something they want or need on there. Is the content compelling? Is it something they need while they're using that device? If it isn't, we can't be surprised if it doesn't get that kind of traction. So initially the headline was like, oh, whoa. And I say that as someone who I've won awards for my mobile intranets. And, if I'm honest, still didn't get that much traction for their use. I can say it was a long time ago now. There's absolutely a role to make services available in the context which people need them. Is that news and content? Maybe not. And maybe we've been focusing too much on the mobile experience and not on the basics of understanding what our users need.
Which
There's some great stuff coming through on the chat here around, is accessing it a barrier? Absolutely. I know on other intranets, so another client that I worked with a few years ago, Bernardo's, the children's charity, what we found there was that a lot of people who are social workers, for example, they've got a really tight window when they're working with troubled families. They've got 60 seconds to check something and come back. So actually what we did for them, non-SharePoint experience, was actually put the intranet on the web and made it into like mobile first. And part of the thinking behind that is we've got to remove the friction in access to the information. But that was based in a very detailed understanding of the context in which those people were working, and recognizing that what they needed was concise information that was very quick and easy to access, so they could go about the things that they're doing. Apologies, Sam, you were about to say something and I spoke over you, so why don't you pick up from here?
Yeah, no worries. No, I was about to say you hit the nail on the head. I think with your earlier point about the SharePoint mobile experience is, the onboarding is really hard. So, Clearbox review lots of mobile first platforms, and they've really thought through things like, well, how do you get someone into the system when you can't send them an email with login details because they haven't got a company email address? So you could maybe do it through a one-time SMS code. You could do it through a QR code. One of the ones, a supervisor can issue password resets just for the 6 people in their team. I think it's just a great way of kind of organic authentication, rather than saying to someone who might be working on a shop front, phone up the IT help desk. Like, actually, when am I going to do that? And I've never spoken to the IT help desk before. But even like once you got into the SharePoint mobile app, it doesn't put news at the front. It doesn't feel like you've gone into a mobile intranet. It feels like you've gone into a pocket document management system. So no wonder they still don't see the news and go to it. So I think there's 7 organizations in the sample size, which is pretty small, but I'm not surprised that we haven't caught someone who's really kind of got around all those issues with SharePoint in the first place. And then, I think also, Sharon, you talk about to relevance. So some of you might know Christy Punch years and years ago. Christy worked for an electric company in the US. And I remember saying even then, all the people in the field wanted to know was there a problem with the grid? Didn't want to know anything from the chairman, didn't know anything about the latest announcement. They just, if there's a problem with the grid, I want to know, and I'll get my phone out and I'll check that. And possibly we don't really tap into that thing about, well, what's the one thing that's really going to be the killer bit of information that can get people taking their phones out rather than sitting down and having a cup of tea and a chat with a colleague, which is always a more appealing thing to do.
Yeah, I was thinking a really good example of that, Sam. It was from one of James Robertson's annual award things, but it was bus timetables. Just standing there at the bus stop.
That's right.
And that's when you need your mobile device. Actually, there are some really situational tasks for which the mobile is really adding value, and you can put the communication in that journey. But unless it's in that context, people aren't going to get that level of engagement with it. We did one, this is absolutely years ago when I worked for the House of Parliament. It was letting MPs know when they had to go and vote, because they did that when they were walking around the building. They needed a notification to let them know to go to the right place. But that is something that's very specific to needing a mobile device. But I had to admit, they didn't go and read news subsequently to doing that. They had a task in mind.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Sam, you've jumped in there talking about this mobile piece, but was that the standout insight for you as well, or was there something else that caught your eye around those key insights?
Well, I'll segue slickly into a related thing, which is about the number of words per article. So I was very surprised that there wasn't a big drop off at 1,500 words, because so often what we hear is people are really time poor. You got to be, straight on point, keep it short, keep it punchy. And I saw, sorry, I missed whose name it was, but someone in the comments saying, yeah, can you imagine reading 1,500 words on a mobile device? You wouldn't. So there is a sense of tying length to audience and to device, and possibly because we got very low mobile usage in the sample, 300 words maybe wasn't very successful for them. 300 words might be a great length if you've got a big frontline audience who just want the, just give me the few snippets. But also for a long time, what I've been feeling is about intranets and digital comms is that it's lovely for servicing different levels of interest. When you used to have the newspaper article that did the inverted pyramid and it looked like a big dense page of text, that was quite off-putting, even if you only read the first 3-4 paragraphs and then went, oh, I know enough, thank you very much. On an intranet, say you got an announcement saying we're going to be moving to these lovely new offices. Some people, all they want to know is, all right, just tell me when I got to pack a box and I'll put my pot plant in there and I'll be ready. And other people are like, where's the window seats? Can I see the blueprints? What's the artist's impression like? And you can give them links to the movie or the images and all the detail if they want it, but we can structure it in a way where it doesn't feel daunting to do that. So after that long ramble, I think maybe for 1,500 words, it's encouraging that some people have an appetite for detail, but it's not just a word count, it's about structuring it in a way that keeps it digestible.
Yeah, absolutely. And that quality piece, how we see that correlation between, the quality of a page and the visitors to that page.
Yes. Interesting.
And I'd like to sort of dive a bit deeper into that in a moment. But Jonas, I really want to get from you, which of the insights was that kind of most resonated with you, which caught your interest most?
There were 2, I would say. The first one, like Sharon, the mobile part. I mean, I've experienced myself that, mobile has never been a big hit. It's never really been used a lot. But I was still surprised that it was that low. in your report. I was thinking of maybe 5-8% in usage, but 0.22 is really close to nothing. And I think to Sharon's point, it also, I mean, it is definitely because of I think often. I mean, accessibility is one thing, but it's also the design. You know, the what is it that people would like to use it for when they can grab their mobile and go into the intranet. I think I try to distinguish between the difference between making a mobile or SharePoint intranet on intranet accessible for mobile and useful for mobile. That's two different things, and I think we've been focusing very much on making it accessible, but not useful. So making it useful is something completely different, because you have to think about how do you design these pages. For instance, the pages we design today is mostly designed when we sit in front look at a laptop and create a lot of text, right? And now we have to think about, you know, if you design it for mobile, first of all, we need to understand the business needs, and then we need to design it in a different way. And I don't think that the technology is actually supporting that in a very good way right now. And also, maybe we are the wrong people who are designing this, because we don't understand the business needs out there good enough to design something that's properly designed. So maybe there's someone else who should help us with doing that. That was the one thing. The second thing is something quite interesting I found, because that was something I normally see that we can actually get some insights into, is the influential editors part, which I find quite helpful when I'm an intranet responsible, because then I can see who are my most important stakeholders when I run the intranet, and where should I be worried if there's someone who's about to leave the company, for instance. So I think that this was actually very interesting to me, that this, I mean, it's not something we normally think of as when we look at measurement or something, but it can be quite helpful when you run the intranet.
I want to pick up on this point you raised around designing for mobile first. This is one that I'd like to get each of your perspectives on, if you have an interest in this question. That it feels to me like for many years there's been a bit of a mantra of saying we have to design for mobile first. We have to create something that's the mobile experience. And it seems like for maybe, I don't know, maybe 5, maybe more years, that's been a front and center kind of theory. And so I'm kind of with you that I found it quite challenging to see just how low that uptake was in our research. But do you think there's still benefits to thinking about designing from a mobile first perspective, right? Is that still valid to have that mobile user in mind, even though there's such low uptake? Does anyone want to jump in with a thought on that?
Are we starting from the wrong starting point by designing for the device and not for the user? Now, I don't know about you, but I have like 3 different screens here and 3 different devices on my desk, and I use them for different things. So actually, I do most of my social on a phone. I will switch between different devices. Teams will take us between different devices. And actually, I've seen some really good examples, and we've done this with some of our clients as well, around actually mapping user journeys for key user groups. And for some of them, they'll be on their desktop for particular tasks, and we've identified some, in your study there. If I sit down, I have my cup of tea in the morning and I might read my internet news. If your role doesn't, and then I will start, the focus tasks of my day, for example. But actually, people who have different roles or different tasks, or potentially different tasks on different days of the week, depending on the nature of their job, will switch between different devices. Maybe we need to be a bit smart about what they need at what time, rather than designing for a device. So what I've seen in other contexts is actually how you use different parts of, say, the Microsoft mix to provide different experiences and different data points, or different communications at different points of the day, depending on what people need. So I bore people with this mantra, but we really need to do a lot more user research. We're really guilty as internet professionals on starting with the technology and not by having a really deep understanding of our people. And bearing in mind they are not amorphous maths. You'll have different people doing different roles at different levels of seniority, or depending on their responsibilities. Really understand how they work, where they work, what their needs are at different points in the day, different points in the year, and how they can be effectively served across multiple devices.
Sam, Jonas?
But I mean,
for me, I think if you're,
I agree, and I think, sorry.
Jonas, you go.
All right. So I think definitely there's definitely a use case for it. But I think if we look at some of the applications that has had success recently with it, they look completely different than a SharePoint mobile intranet. So they are, supercharged in terms of, let's say, for instance, people working in stores, for instance. So what do they need? Push SMS, they need a video, and they need maybe an internal social media platform, and then they need a learning journey, right? So that they can be onboarded quickly. And that's what they need. So, I mean, how can we design something for these specific people who have specific needs in their jobs? I think that's interesting to look at. And I don't think, and that's why I also said into the benchmarking report, I think the SharePoint user experience is underwhelming when we look at, serving different and specific use cases.
And Sam?
From my point of view, we do a lot of strategies for organizations who are looking at designing a new intranet, and the cost of making it mobile accessible compared to not making it mobile accessible is negligible now. So you might as well. And in a way, it's good practice, because if it works nicely on a mobile screen in terms of being responsive and adaptive and so on, it's probably also going to work on other sides of screens. And incidentally, we often don't design for really big screens, and we should. We assume everyone's got a little laptop, but like Sharon and I think we've both got massive monitors, and therefore intranets that don't make use of all that other screen is possibly a bit of a waste as well. But a more challenging thing to throw in there is maybe we shouldn't be thinking about designing intranets for frontline workers. That's the wrong starting point. We should be giving them mobile accessible services that happen to also communicate with them. So it might be, for example, shift management. Oh, I want to swap my shift, or just remind me when I'm due back on. Oh, I see there's a new announcement, something that I need to know. But very few frontline workers are motivated to go and say, I wonder if there's a video from the chief executive that will fill up 15 hours this morning. It's that is not what is going to draw them into it. So maybe it's more about saying, let's treat our internet as a content source, but not necessarily a delivery channel.
Exactly that. To pick up on one of the points you made there is actually really understanding what time people have available to access the internet. Particularly when we're talking about frontline staff, if you're in retail or healthcare, whatever, actually the windows of time you have available are different from those who are in desk-based jobs. And again, it's touched on in the report. And in that window, my time might be more tightly managed, but on the basis of that role, particularly if I work in say retail. So actually, like you say, maybe I want to go in and check my shift on my way to work to see if I can do a swap or something, and you can set up a content experience at the same time. But no one is going to log onto the internet from the privacy of their own sofa to check out the CEO's latest video. It just simply doesn't happen.
There was a lovely story from Woodies in Ireland that I heard at Internet Italia last year. Woodies is like a do-it-yourself chain of stores. And they had a very social element to the intranet where they did a lot of knowledge sharing, a lot of community building. And it was so well received that even when people left employment at Woodies, they said, oh, can I keep going into the Woodies social space? Because all my friends there, and Twitter's become a bit toxic and Facebook's a little bit too polished, but I like Woodies. It feels like that's a good place to hang out. And what a great measure of success that is. But again, it's back to that direct relevance for particularly frontline workers.
I guess the other thing that's bubbling around my head is this 17 minutes a day on average that people are spending on the intranet. Sam, I saw your face then, was like, whoa.
That's because they can't find stuff, Pete. They're just like, where's that bloody expense form gone?
Yeah, is this interesting thing, right? Like it's one of these metrics that sparks 50 questions for me around, is a lot of time on the intranet a good thing? Is a little amount of time a good thing? And again, it comes to that really complex thing of context, right? So I'd like to get some thoughts from you. Jonas, can I put you on the spot and just say, what are your thoughts on this 17 minutes a day on average on the intranet, visiting and reading content?
I would say, I was surprised as well that I found it to be a long time. Maybe it's because, as Sam said, people can't find what they're looking for, that it might not be a great success to have people hanging around so long. I think, I mean, I find especially that number a bit difficult to analyze or to figure out what to do with it. And maybe this actually needs, maybe you need to work with, let's say, personas and see, okay, what would the best benchmark be, or whatever, when we talk about, what would a specific persona normally use the intranet for, and how much time should that actually take, based on what kind of pages they normally visit or something, because I think it's a difficult number to actually do something with or about. We can't really say if it's good or bad. I'm just surprised that it's 17 minutes based on my own experiences on what you use an intranet for. But in other organizations, everything could actually be done through an intranet, and then it might be okay, or maybe it might be too. Again, there's someone who wrote something in the chat. Typical consultancy answer is it depends, and I think it depends.
Yeah,
right now.
Yeah. It's really interesting.
Oh, sorry, Karen.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it feels a bit like we sort of set that up, but we didn't. When you mentioned personas, Jonas, one of the things we're working on and we're getting out there now is some personas around, okay, what are the types of reader that you have on your intranet? So if as we sort of explore that more and develop more, we'll definitely be going down that route to try and sort of get some additional layer of insight into, how are people behaving in that time that they're spending on the intranet. I think that's the next level of insight. And so from a SWOOP perspective, we're doing a lot of work to develop that.
Cool.
Sorry, Sharon,
No, probably building on the point that Sam made, on its own, that number doesn't tell you anything. We differ from other organisations. Is it that our content was super engaging, people loved, reading it, or does it mean it made no sense and they couldn't work out, the answer to their question from what should be a pretty basic page? But a high number of minutes per day on the internet is not on its own a good metric. We want people to be able to get on with their jobs. People should be able to go in, find what they want to do, and get on with the things they'd rather be doing. But with that in mind, I think it does point to another thing, which is actually with intranets, we often focus on how to make it easier for people to publish, and not the other way around. How do we make it easier for people to read? Actually, we've only got 10 minutes of people's day, or could we give them 3 things that they can read and properly understand and action, rather than one really long-winded thing? Actually, so I think it's come up in the chat a little bit here. It's actually, how do we maintain that focus on making the content itself really easy to access and use? And actually, in some ways, I think we should make things a lot harder to publish. We put in more kind of checks and balances and roadblocks that say, have you checked that, this meets a clear user need? Is it properly laid out? Does it have a call to action? Does it have clear, unambiguous language? So instead of just saying, just put it up here and it will, then the job is done. Actually, we do need higher quality content, and some of the way I can see Sam shaking his head there. But actually, I'm a big advocate of we need to focus on making it easier for readers and not necessarily easier for communicators, because there's far more of them than there are of us.
Sam, I can see you nodding.
I sense disagreement.
You do wonderfully well. No, of course, I absolutely agree. It needs to be easy for readers. I just think maybe I was just reacting to the word roadblocks, and barriers to publishing. We need to make it really easy for people to publish well and to a high standard. But the thing is the more friction you add to it, the more likely they are to revert back to that. I'll just send that as an email then.
Yeah. And there's lots of things you can do that sort of, to flag up, poor quality,
yes.
Poor quality language and things like that. But what I've done with other organisations and seen it work really, really well is much more focused on training. What does good content look like? Because in too many organisations, there is I've just got to get this out, get it published, because then that stakeholder is off my back, and that shouldn't be the case. It should be much more focused on, is this content doing a job for readers and audiences?
A little bit about AI inevitably crop up in the chat, and to that point, Sharon, I think what's interesting.
I don't think it has yet, but everyone's about to be disappointed.
I think it
That's great.
It's a zoom by. Copilot is going to offer something quite interesting, which is, for example, when leaders are posting within Viva Engage, it will analyse the article and say, these are questions that you're likely to get about what you're drafting. And I think that's a great bit of on-the-fly coaching from AI to say, hey, you could work this answer into your response, rather than waiting for lots of people to say, I don't understand this, or did you really mean that? Pete, just Can I bring in a couple of other interesting statistics related to
sure.
what we're talking about in terms of usage?
Absolutely, please.
One of the ones in the report said the most popular news articles attract 200 or more times the number of visitors than the average news article. So you call these blockbuster articles, which I thought were really interesting. And content pages on average attract more visitors, and the blockbuster effect is even more extreme. The most visited pages attract more than 1,000 times the average visitor rate. So some pages are massive hits and some news stories are massive hits. And that got me thinking, because my first reaction was like, oh, how do we create more of those blockbusters? And then back to the earlier point, well, I thought, you know what? It's not actually our job to create popular content. I could write loads of news stories about pay increases and cute kittens and get loads of hits. But ultimately, the internet is always going to be a tool for the business. And we have to say, well, what are the things that we should be doing on the internet that are aligned with the business purpose? And then how do we make it digestible and attractive to employees to engage with that rather than engage per se?
Yeah. At SWOOP, we often talk about sort of, you've got to have 3 factors covered, not just one. So is it used, is it usable, and is it useful? And those 3 things combined are what makes for value, I think. And let me just I'll just share screen so I can show you sort of the kind of things that you can see in SWOOP for SharePoint, because I'm not sure if everybody who's on the call.
What could be interesting to know a bit more about in terms of, figuring out what are we talking about when we're talking about a blockbuster, is maybe something about, I don't know, topic or anything, because my own experience is that it could be like sometimes they write themselves these blockbusters. It could be organizational changes, or that everybody gets a new laptop. So this could actually be some things you have to do, not necessarily articles you can write based on some kind of recipe. So
I think it is worth all of us getting into the habit of, we should be reviewing our analytics a bit more and saying, right, what are the articles that are getting high levels of engagement? Should we do more of them? Or if we've got 1 or 2 runaway articles, but they're about, job losses, we can't be surprised when lots of people are going to read them. We should also hope that we don't get too many of them, because they're fundamentally bad news. Again, low levels of views are not necessarily a bad news story. The story I always go back to is the whistleblowing page. Like, in an ideal world, it would get no views because it wouldn't be needed, but it absolutely needs to exist. We should be keeping an eye on it. And if you do have pages that should be getting views but aren't, then we really need to assess why. But it's a habit that we as communicators absolutely need to build in, not just looking at stats because they're there, but using them to drive improvement to our content and to our sites. And unfortunately, too many people sort of produce a report and send it to their management team, but don't really do a lot with the data, in which case you've got to wonder why you collect it at all.
Yeah, this is what I kind of wanted to show here, that I think is really sort of relevant to all this stuff we're discussing around quality and creating content that works within its context. And it definitely, well, I think I'm massively biased because I'm working for SWOOP, but if I'd had a tool like SWOOP for SharePoint when I was managing intranets, just thinking about being able to go in and see, what are my top news stories, what are my top pages, but alongside that we're also seeing this health score that gives some sense of the quality, the experience, the engagement on the page. And so I can look at this and I can say across my whole intranet, is it being used? Is it useful? Is it usable? Is coming through in this health score that we've come up with, that automatically gives you a reference point around quality. It's giving you a score in terms of the experience and the engagement. So we're really trying at SWOOP to change the game, I think, in terms of SharePoint intranets, and give that extra layer of detail and insight that allows for people to see, okay, I've got a data point that's potentially a flag, right? So therefore that's of interest. I might go and have a look at that. What can I actually see in that? And with SWOOP for SharePoint, we've developed it so you could say across the whole intranet, what's the top news story? I can say it's that news story there. I can then click on that and see at a page level a much more detailed overview of, okay, what's happening in terms of quality, experience, engagement on that page. So, and each of you, I think, have mentioned at different points various sort of elements of the most organizations now have a decentralized content model, right? Where I think Sam, I think it was you that said we should be making it easy for people to create good content. And so equipping content owners with a tool like this, where they could have their pages that they own and jump in and see on a dashboard, have I got spelling mistakes? Are there broken links? How old is it? What's the engagement in terms of estimated visitor time versus actual visitor time? And am I structuring the content in a really usable way? Am I using headings? Am I writing in a way that's actually readable? And so I feel like, speaking as an intranet manager myself, I go, my God, this, like, the ability to scale a sort of shared language of quality improvement, I think could be really powerful in organizations. So as we're sort of talking on that, it was just buzzing away in my head to go, like, this resonates with me, because it's the kind of stuff that we're trying to build in SWOOP for SharePoint. So yeah, I just wanted to share that in case there's people on the call that are sitting there going, okay, this sounds nice, but how do we actually get this insight? And if you are on this call and thinking, I'd love to be able to get the kind of insight and have it at my fingertips, you can get a long way to having a much deeper understanding of what's happening on your SharePoint intranet. So that's the one sort of sales plug thing I wanted to get in, but I wasn't planning on sharing screen and showing this, but I just think it's so relevant when we're talking about useful, usable, used, and the experience and the quality leading to engagement. It's all this sort of narrative that I feel like the industry is talking about, and we've got an opportunity now, I think, to kind of bring it all together and give people access to analytics that can help them shift that. So that's sort of where I think SWOOP is hoping to come in and help solve problems for some people. So yeah, like I say, that's the one sort of shameless plug of the product, but because I totally believe in it, and it's touching on so much of the stuff that you're talking about, and I feel like as a collective we can take a big step forward, and we can get much more much more insight that can help the industry move forward a kind of leap. Maybe I'm too hopeful, but you know, if we can start seeing these quality metrics and getting to that level beyond, and Jonas, your point around personas, you know, in that time, what are people doing there? There's going to be real value in that conversation. Conscious of the time, I wanted to get to a kind of a question that I'm hoping we might be able to give some really practical tips and advice to the people on the call. I'd love to hear from each of you. What if someone's sitting here watching this now as an intranet manager, or they're managing the intranet as a key part of their role? What should they be thinking about? Which of these insights should they be really sort of thinking about and going, how do I apply this? How could they apply these sorts of insights into their own thinking right now? What should they be really taking away and thinking about how do I apply this to my intranet?
So what I've been reflecting on as a thread in all the, well, that's a big number, that's a little number, and what we're kind of doing tacitly is, behind analytics, you need a theory. You need a theory of what are we trying to do with our intranet, and then what does this data tell us about validating that theory or not? Is 70 minutes good or bad? Well, I don't know. If our theory is that we want to immerse people in stories and really kind of like embrace the organization, maybe it's great. If our theory is we want to give them snippets of information so they for health and safety purposes, maybe it's not good at all. So I would say, you know, figure out what are the 5 major things you're trying to do with your intranet, and maybe what are the 10 measures that will tell you if you're going in the right direction, and then use this SWOOP benchmarking report to maybe calibrate, well, what might good look like for us? Because there's no definitive answer from the average of the organizations that you've looked at, but it does give you a start point of saying, oh, 40% of our employees go on the intranet every day. Is that good or bad? Well, according to the SWOOP report, it's not great. So that stretches us to go a bit further than we did before. And one example I was thinking of as we were talking about it was we work with a European pharmaceutical, and as an organization, they would love it. All about the people. The CEO was very personable. You went on the internet, you'd think they hated people, and all they talked about were P&L and machines. You know, we said, so you know, where's the embodiment of your culture on your internet? What about doing more people stories about the individuals who work for the organization? They went, nobody read people stories. And then we looked at the analytics, like they absolutely do. You know, of all the articles that people react to, comment on, read to the end, is actually the human interest stories. So there was a theory, the data validated it, and they said, let's change your editorial tone a little bit and bring your culture to life.
Yeah, nice. Sharon, I can kind of feel you wanting to share something.
Is that appropriate?
Well, I mean, facts are friendly. So I think as intranet owners or managers, it's incumbent on us to really understand how our intranet's being used and where the gaps are in people's expectations or its ability to help people do their jobs or feel more engaged or generally, achieve business objectives. And to Sam's point there, some of that is really having a deep understanding of your analytics. If you've got a tool like SWOOP, great. Whatever you have the back end of your intranet, really build an understanding of what does it actually mean. If people are spending a long time on the internet, is that good? Is that bad? But actually, that can provide us either a starting point to go and observe people out at work, to talk to users, or the other way around. If you have anecdotal feedback to say people hate this, it helps us to make the case of whether or not that assertion is true or not. But actually, it's building the story, using insight and backing up with data, or the other way around, to really get a sense of what our intranet is doing, and ultimately what is it not doing, because analytics will only tell you about people who actually do use the internet. A lot of time it won't tell you about the myriad ways in which they don't. So examples I always go back to are, if you go and spend time in call centres or in people's offices, what are all the post-it notes they've got around the edge of the screen? That's all the things they have no confidence they'll ever be able to find again, right? So that already shows you some search intent, but on paper, what are the things that they've printed off because they need that policy all the time and they don't know how to find it, or if the one that they do find is still accurate. These little insights can give you some ideas on what the challenges are with your existing internet and what you need to improve. Then you can go back to the analytics and understand, where is that challenge? Is it a poor user journey? Is it the information is hard to read or understand? Is it not targeting people effectively? We need to build that understanding both through a deep understanding of our users and what they need and how our existing channels are performing. Bring those two things together to really get a sense of what do we need to do to fix that.
Cool. And Jonas, for you, what would your practical kind of advice be to people?
Yeah, I can't, remember how many times people in different businesses, also when I work with the intranets, ask me, do you have any benchmarks of how other companies are doing or performing on intranets? So as Sam said earlier on, I think use it as a starting point to begin with, because we are often, a lot of organizations use intranets with absolutely no data right now still. So they have no clue what's going on. And then when we talk with the executive suite, they would really like to have some numbers. And it's also, that could be a conversation starter at least, but not, show them, tell them that this is the ultimate truth. But it could also be some kind of a conversation starter in terms of, managing expectations, because sometimes expectations in the executive level is, completely different than reality. And that could be a good way to maybe kind of manage expectations and set the right, you could say, standards or something. But it could also be, to discuss, as it looks right now, mobile usage is not really, flying. So if we really would like to succeed with this, maybe we should start looking at another approach, or look at another tool or whatever is needed, or someone else who could help us with it in terms of people from the business to define use cases. But we can use it for different practical things when we start with our intranet journey and improve our intranets.
It's really interesting to me, this idea of whenever we use the word design, and this is just sort of purely anecdotal, my own experience and thought, when people speak about intranet design, just using that phrase, like I'm doing a project to redesign our intranet, something like that. You hear those sorts of things being said a lot, and there's almost like an understood process around that people sort of just default to and go, this is what an intranet looks like, this is what an intranet does. And why I'm so passionate about getting better analytics is because that always frustrated the hell out of me, that there's this sort of default of this is what an intranet is and what it does. Whereas if you get good analytics and you can get some baselines and benchmarks, but really sort of saying, okay, where are we right now? And then focusing on the user from that point and bringing that together. Like if you're just going out and talking to your users and saying, oh, this is what they say they want, so we'll give them that, you run into all sorts of blind alleys of going, well, there's a big difference between what people say and what they do. And so marrying up the sort of user research piece with some robust analytics is going to help you get to a better endpoint, right? And I think we're starting to see that in the industry more and more. And the thing I often do is urge people to go and talk to their digital teams in their organization, go and talk to your marketing colleagues and your website teams. And can you imagine if they were managing the website and they weren't referencing their analytics and planning around that? It would never happen. And yet very often in an organization, it's like, well, just do an intranet. And these scenarios still exist. It kind of amazes me. So that's sort of my parting thought, because you know me, I like to hold the mic for a moment at least. But look, we're coming towards the end of
just very shortly. This is also why it's so difficult for us to prove the value of it, right? So we cannot really progress the conversation about what we should use an intranet for in organizations, because we don't have the numbers to have this kind of conversation.
Yeah, really important point, and I can pretty much guarantee that 99.9% of people on this call will have at some point in their career said, why don't they understand how important this is? And it's like you start to think about ROI calculations and proving the worth of the work that you do. There are better ways that you can do that, and particularly now that, again, it's why I'm really pleased with SWOOP developing this SharePoint product, that we can hopefully help people make the case for more investment, more care, more time and energy funneled towards building better experiences where an intranet is a key component of that experience, right? That's ultimately what we want to get to. It's not so much about I need an intranet. It's like, let's create a digital employee experience where at relevant points in that, the intranet is playing a key part that's relevant to the context at the time. So it's hugely complex, and analytics is going to help you on that front. I do want to share a few links to wrap things up, but before I start sharing some slides again, let me say thank you so much, Sharon, Sam, and Jonas, for making the time to share your wisdom with everybody. I've not really been able to read it because I've been fascinated kind of listening in and asking the questions, but I see the chat has been absolutely flying with loads of comments and thoughts. So thank you everybody for getting involved on the chat. I really hope you've got the value that I got today. I sort of feel a little bit like, oh, I'm chatting through my heroes. So I've got the intranet nerd factor going into overdrive for me personally. So I hope those of you on the call have enjoyed it too. Before you all disappear, let me share some links. If I just come here. And I want to share some links to the current benchmarking report once this is loaded up, to make sure those of you who are sort of thinking, okay, what's this benchmarking report all about? Here's where you can access that and download the SharePoint benchmarking report today, and you can get all of these key insights and a lot more data behind them. Really good read. Get on it, get reading it, think about how you can use the data in there to think about your own environment, your own ecosystem, and how you can drive improvement there. I would invite everyone on here to do this. Get in touch with us. Register to participate in our next benchmarking study. If you've got a SharePoint online intranet, get registered. Let us get SWOOP for SharePoint set up in your environment and crunch your data for you. It's free to get involved. You can then have your data contributing to the next edition of the SharePoint Benchmarking Report. And most importantly, you can get that baseline that each of our experts today mentioned, like get that deeper understanding of what's happening in your environment right now. Get that understanding of where you're at now, and then think about those rules of like, okay, for us, is this good? Is this bad? There's decisions that you need to make, and there's strategic kind of considerations that you've got to think about your own context. What's the data showing you? What therefore constitutes an objective for you in terms of your improvement journey, and how can you drive that continuous improvement? So if you're interested at all in going on that continuous improvement journey, make sure that you get in touch with us at SWOOP, and we can get you set up so that you can participate in this benchmarking exercise for free. It would be an absolute pleasure to have you join us in that endeavor. And while we talk about future endeavors, let me share with you as well, for those of you that are interested in Viva Engage, we've got our Viva Engage benchmarking report is coming up in November, and you can pre-register to download that. So we're increasingly seeing people talk to us about that pairing of their SharePoint Intranet and Viva Engage. And I think that's a really positive sign, as people are really understanding more and more that, you know, an intranet doesn't exist in isolation anymore. I don't think it has existed in isolation for many years now, but a lot of organizations are slow to realize that concept. And so it's great that we've got really detailed and deep analytics on Viva Engage and SharePoint, and we're increasingly seeing people wanting to marry up those two channels in particular and understand, well, what's happening on the social context, what's happening on the content context, how do we optimize in this environment relevant to our context. So get on the Viva Engage benchmarking report pre-register list if that's of interest to you. Other than that, just once again, thank you so much to our experts. Really appreciate you making the time, and really appreciate your knowledge, your wisdom, and your appetite to share that. So thank you so much, everybody.